Tonight, while hey Teves, Samech Tes, we're on Ahmed Zion of Shir in Samech Tes.
Right, so we're studying in the difference between koyach and oyer. When I get to the koyach hatzomeach, and we saw that the union from koyach was a dover which was nimshach or even mugbal, and it came from the mokir, or came from atzmas saying safe in the form of havdolah. But that's beklalas the union of the Rishimo Lamaila in the Shurish, for those who know anything about that union, that the Rishimo is b'derech havdolah, the ilu oil is nimshach b'derech mamela from the moya, b'derech gilui, and it's davke b'dveikas, v'iskashus ashmius in the moya. Machenke, the kelim, their shurish is in the Rishimo, and they're not even from havdolah davke. So therefore we said that even though B'Klolos we're comparing the Koyach Hatzomeach Asher Ba'oretz to the union of Oyer, and therefore we're talking about Ha'ora Klolius and Ha'ora Proteus, but the union of Ha'ora is Davke from Ha'moyer. However, we wanted to suggest that we can suggest that the Koyach Hatzomeach is really from the level of koyach lamayla, and therefore be'iker it's shaykh to the hamshocha at the shurish hakelim v'loi ha'oyer the inyan koyach hu b'chinas havdolah. Koyach is the inyan which is the inyan of a hamshocha nivdelas, even a specific limitation from Hashem, and that's different in its shurish, and it's got a different form of relationship to the original moya of Hashem than what oya has. And so therefore we wanted to suggest that the koyach hatzomeach b'ifim kloli is al derech v'kelim rather than gilui or oya mamish. However, as a one-on, that the kelim also their hashpah, in particularly into elam as biyah, is also b'derech oyer in a way, and therefore they are a source of divine shefa into the elements, just like the union of oyer is. So therefore, it's only that it comes in a slightly different oifen, and later becomes majorly different in its hamshocha from the atzmas, either b'derech havdolah or b'derech iskashus or b'derech oyer moya, in the sense of dveikas of the oyer in the moya. So therefore, that was a suggestion. With that, we can say that the koyach hatzomeach, the ha'ora, which is nimshach mimenu, is amnam the ma'ain ha'etzem, because every ha'ora which is nimshach from shurish atzmi is a ha'ora bilvad, and therefore it's a me'ain. We discussed the whole concept of yesterday, the me'ain ha'moya. However, we're now altering it slightly, that it's not mamish the gilui of oyer from moya, but it's the gilui of the shefa, which is a form of oyer, which is nimshach from kelim, from the inyan of dollar and koyach, rather than the inyan from oyer. That was what we saw in the brackets. V'gam de'yesh leim the koyach hatzomeach hu inyan ha'koyach v'loi oyer, inyan ha'koyach hu b'chinas havdolah. And therefore we saw that yesh leima l'chein hu einei muchrach. That's put down in all the places we talk about the difference between oyer and koyach, that koyach is nimshach davke b'kavana u'berotzen. Mashenkein oyer is nimshach from its moya b'derech mamela. But even though lamaila you can't say that, you can't really say that the oyer is nimshach from the atzmas b'derech moya. You can't really say that. However, we can say that compared to the way the kelim are nimshach from the moya, then the oyer is nimshach from the moya of the atzmas ki'ilu would be b'derech mamela, even though it's not really compared to the way the Kalim are nimshach, then it's much more comparable and obvious that it's an inyan Ratzoni than it is by the Oyer. And therefore we find, even in certain cases which are referring to Nivroim, we find that if we compare them to the inyan of a Oyer, then we call them as being like almost created on their own, rather than actually using the words that the Eivishter created them. And therefore we find in davening every day we say Yahalu Hashem Hashem Ki Hu Tzivo V'Nivro, that the Eivishter commanded and they just came out, they just came about. And so that expression of they just came about, well, that's ultimately the concept of Oyer with Moya. Mashkein by the inyan from Keli and the inyan of Koyach, as we expressed last night, well, that's brought down in the Novi in Yirmiyahu Ator Siso as Oretz Vashamayim Bekoyachacho Hagodel Siso, with your great Koyach. That's already an inyan of direct Asiya, and therefore the relationship is of a Puyel Mitanifal, not a inyan from Hu Tzivo V'Nivro, how it is by the Oyer. So with that we'll see as we go along, maybe, that we earn, as I hinted yesterday, we earn certain advantages in the general argument by saying the Koyach HaTzamech is more al derech v'di hamshocha of Kalim than it is the inyan from Oyer. And therefore the Rebbe says, Bepashtas, we also earn the fact that it's not b'derech mamera, it's not muchrak, but it's davke b'derech retzoni. I am Ashkosu Bim Rabina, and we described briefly the chapter Perek Yubes in the Imre Bina, which is a very basic chapter, albeit very difficult to follow, in which the Mittler Rebbe describes all these different processes called Yesh Me'ayin and Min HaMoyer and the infinite Gilui HaHelem, all the basic concepts that we described at some length last night. Where there the Rebbe Rashab draws a lengthy difference between those two concepts of Oyer v'Koyach. V'yesh lema tegam b'chinas Koyach hine hagilui hu me'ein ha'etzem. So that we're now going back to our original concept that the ha'ora is me'ein ha'moya, even though hagam is the lashon of, like correcting somewhat what we're saying, almost in the form of akashya, hagam, even though we said it's not mamish oyer mit moya, it's already keli with shoresh kelim, it's already dinim from koyach, but nonetheless, and that's what he writes over there in Kofei Bekislev, that nonetheless, despite the fact that the general hamshocha of Keli Ligabi is very different, as B'derech HaDolah, nonetheless you can still say that the Gilui from particularly the Shoresh of the Kelim is also Mi'ein Ha'etem. It's also Oyer Mi'ein HaMoya, even though basically it's a different hamshocha B'Shoresh. But still that concept of a certain dveikis of the Oyer in its moya in such a way that we can say that it has in itself the essential characteristics or similarities of the moya, that we can say even if we'll say that the Koyach HaTzamech is Keli, not Oyer. So there was the Rebbe follows that the first ha'ora, which is nimshach from the Koyach HaTzamech, being as it is a ha'ora mi'a'etzem, despite the fact that it's from Keli, not Oyer, nonetheless we can still say the klal of Oyer me'ein ha'moya, and we can still say that it's me'ein ha'etzem. And therefore, pink to say that the Koyach HaTzamech is a inyan klali on pshitas betachas ha'pshitas, moved off from any tziur prati, from any form, specific form of Gilui. Therefore, the ha'ora ha'nimshuk memenu is also like that. And that was what we saw. The ha'ora Claudius, which is nimshach from the Koyach HaTzamech, is also klali adayin, and it's not a mokir for any specific smicha of all the different smachim al pnei ha'adoma. And then we have to have a further ha'ora from that ha'ora, and that's what we saw was the ha'ora proteus, which is already shaykh to the inyan of koyach lahachmiya.
You said that koyach was a defined power, and now you said it's me'ein ha'mor. So the etzem is bli gvul, and koyach is gvul.
Yeah, no, we're talking about the etzem of the mocha of the church of the kelim. We're talking about the Rishima, the mocha and church of the kelim. That even there, the Amshocha is different, but we say that the Oyer is me'ein ha'mor. So, it says.
You could describe the difference between and koyach like a very
Yeah, we had that. You missed out. I'm sorry. You've just got to put up with what you miss out. We discussed that at great length yesterday. All right. So he says, "Okemoi bechinas bekemoi bedalet." I'm sorry. Mach beinen choyma tzurave tikun. So now this inyan of choyma tzurave tikun is three lashonos which occur very often in Chassidus. We have to define once again in what reference they come up in order to understand what is the relativity to it here. And that is that we have somewhat developed the argument now by saying that this is more Amshocha of Keli rather than Oyer, and even the Koyach HaTzameach is really Derech Kli rather than it is, or Derech Amshocha Kelim rather than it is Derech HaOyer. And therefore, says the Rebbe, we can compare this now to another inyan which occurs in Chassidus, and that is that whenever we say that a yesh comes about from an ayin, in other words, wherever anything which eventually ends up being a yesh is created from the ayin Eloki, then it doesn't go with a sudden jump. It goes in like three stages. Now, even though it's mavur in many places in Chassidus that it does go with a jump, but that only means in the ultimate error of the yesh to the ayin. That ultimately the yesh has no error cloud to the ayin from which it's nimsha, and therefore we say that it's a diluk. It's how they call a tremendous difference of error from one to the other. However, in the actual process whereby the ayin Eloki produces the yesh, there's a series of different stages. The truth of the matter is, and the ayin doesn't just produce the yesh absolutely without stages. And the reason for that is that sof kosof, there's also got to be some way that the yesh can find itself back to the ayin. Because if it would be just a complete and utter break-off between the ayin Eloki and the yesh, then there would never really be any possibility of the yesh making its way back to its ayin and finding some way or another b'derech avedim, b'derech hasogya, its mokeh, which is the ayin. Now, why is emes elokus called ayin? Because it's like the negation of all inyonim, how they are by a yesh. In other words, elokus, even in a ha'ora, compared to a yesh, they are absolutely ein oreich one to the other legamrei. And that's what ultimately reflects itself in the yesh. It comes out from the ayin that the yesh has no real kesher with the ayin, and there's no real hasoge in it, even though it can be masik certain inyonim beneger to the ayin. And therefore, that's only in the ultimate, what you might call yachas of the two. However, when the ayin on Eloki produces a yesh, it goes like in three different stages. Alright, we find beneger to the Elamus Biyah, for example. We find Bria, Yetzirah, V'Asiya. Now they come and they're created by Malchus Atzilus. What Malchus Atzilus is Mamish Elokus. That's Mamish Elokus. And Malchus Atzilus is the emes ayin Eloki, and he produces the ultimate yesh, how it is in Olam Asiya, the yesh Agashmi. But in order to reach the ultimate extreme of the yesh, which is the yesh Agashmi, we go through Olam HaBriya and Olam HaYetzirah. In other words, it's like stages in the middle. Then we reach the ultimate yesh lamata b'olam hazeh, and those three levels are called chomer, tzura, v'tikun. In other words, chayma means a raw material. That's what it means. It means like a shapeless raw material. That's the word chayma. The word tzura means a form or a shape. And the word tikkun means a maintenance or a fixing. In other words, the ultimate shaping of the whole outcome, which is the yesh, in its finished malacha, and therefore sometimes the concept of gemar malacha is called tikkun. When you finish a job and you've made it the way it's meant to be according to plan, well, that's called the tikkun of the zah. So when we say tikkun here in this particular inyan, we mean the finishing of the yesh hagashmi lamata, what you might call the finishing of the malacha. The Eibishter finishes the final task down here in Olam HaAsiyah. Well, first of all, there's chayma and there's tzura. Now, Olam HaBriya is called chaymer. Now, why is Olam HaBriya called chaymer? The Ramban writes at the beginning of his Pirush al HaTorah that when the Eibishter created the first stage of the yesh, min al-ayin, he made what he calls over there a chaymer poshut hiyuli. As the Ramban himself uses that expression. And he says that and he doesn't use the expression Olam HaBriya, because that's a later expression in the latter, that he called Mukubalim. It's not really there in the Ramban, that exact expression. However, he says that there's a first Olam, which is a Choymer Hiyuli Poshut, which means that the Eibishter brings about something which is already legabi the pshitas of the ayin, it's already yesh. But legabi the ultimate yesh, it's not yesh at all. It's only what we call efsharius hayesh. It could be that there will come from that yesh. Mashenkin in the ayin eloki, there's no shaykhis to anything of a yesh. That is mamish elokus. And we've jumped, as it were, already ein aroit from something which is absolute elokus, and then what's called ayin, the negation of all materials, into a level which is already become a possibility of being a yesh, but it's not mamish yesh bepashtet. And then what's called like a shapeless material. That's what he calls it, a choyma hiyuli poshut. And the difference between it and the ayin, if you say it's poshut, well, the ayin is also poshut. Ma'avdil b'nayim. The ayin eloki is not able to be mekabel any tzura of anything which is cholila niva. The ayin, how it is in Olam HaBriya, that's already able to have in itself kol mamish ba'ivim poshut and ba'ivim shel hiyuli, as we mentioned that whole concept yesterday. Already all the tzuras which are eventually going to come. Which are eventually going to come out. And so that's the big difference between it, and that's a huge and immense difference between it and the Ayin Eloki. But then we go further, and we go down into Olam HaYetzira, what Yetzira is from the word Tzura, and the word Tzura means already the beginning of a shape. Dahainu, that all the Nivroim take on a shape which is eventually going to be much closer to the way they are as Yesh Papoyo, but it's still in a high and developed and general sort of a way compared to the way it eventually becomes. And there, for example, in the famous Hemshech, also the Rebbe writes over there about the union of time, for example. He says time in Olam HaYetzira is, a different and very much greater measurable quantity than what it is here. In other words, 1 unit of time over there would be like how many units of time over here, and it's hard for us to be mitzayer latzmeinu eize sug zman zeh, but it's already a inyan of zman, how it's in a very general and botildik stage. It hasn't become yet, but it's already revealed a certain tzura, and therefore we find all sorts of other inyanim in Olam HaBriya, or it's brought down, in Olam HaYetzira, that there's already a certain appearance of all sorts of inyanim, how eventually they come out in this world. But they're already a revealed shape or form, but they're not a complete mugbal dikayesh the way it is down here in this world. And then after that we go further, Olam Hoasiya, that's called tikkun. That's called, because that's already the gemar malacha, that's a completion. And then the yesh comes out in all its details, a myriad limiting things which limited in its own particular metzias, and everything becomes a fixed and final metzias yesh. And that's called the tikkun. So those three madregas are between the ayin and the yesh. So the Rebbe is suggesting now that since we said that the close inyan of the koyach hatzemeach is a inyan of keli, is a inyan of koyach rather than oyer, therefore we can compare him to this whole concept of yesh mi'ayin, because the whole concept of yesh mi'ayin is soch the inyan of the koyach hakli, that's the koyach to be mahava the dover b'derech metzias and not b'derech oyer, because oyer is inyan from complete bittul to the moyer. And ever said the Rebbe, it goes, we could suggest, similar to that inyan of Choyma Tzurava Tikkun, that first of all is an absolute general state, but that's the Ha'ora Klalius, and then the further derivations which lead to a further Ha'ora which is able to produce the details of all the Tzmachim.
Is it that it's the ayin is with Malchus to Tzilas?
That's right.
And then there's two in between, and then the...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, like two madregas of
between.
But the third one is also a madrega. It's the actual finishing of
That's
the yesh.
Finish.
Right. I've always said, so where are we? Be'inyan chayim atzura v'tikun. The tzura who raises a gilui. Shehu lefi erech achaymer adayin. וכמוי בדלת יסיידס שבחינס החוימר הוא הנויסי אס כל הדלת צורס בבחינס פשיטס והצורה הוא שנסגרו בבחינס דלת צורס אבל כל אחד הוא בחינס פשיטס עדיין מבחינס המציאות ואי מה שכוסף מזה בדיבר מסל ציין במשפט טיפורי רי סמך בייס. Now, the Rebbe gives over there, and that Maimer, that's a very famous Maimer, Tziyun B'mishpat Tipode, Reis Sama Beis, he gives over there a biur beneged to the, what's called the four elements, Daled Yeseides. According to Siddur, there's the four elements in all matter, and even for that matter in Lamaila, ordinary matter, all the way up into Oilam Bria, Oilam Saruchnium, you have the Daled Yeseides, which are Eish, Mayim, Ruach, and Ofer, or Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofer. Those are the four Yeseides. So those four Yeseides also undergo a whole series of different Giluim from the Ayin Eloki and how they develop and eventually become Daled Yeseides Gashmiyim Lamata in Olam Hazeh. And so he says like this, that they follow also those three patterns of Chayma, Tzurava, V'tikun. And on the contrary, they are the klolos of all the Nivroim of Olam Hazeh. All the Inonim which are going to be Nivra of Olam Hazeh are made up of the Daled Yeseides. So even the way the Daled Yeseides come out Lamata in Olam Hazeh, they're also general for the time being, and then there's a further much more detailed undergoing in the tikkun of the Daled Yeseides. After the tikkun kloli of the Daled Yeseides, then there's a further tikkun of the building or the interrelationship of all the Daled Yeseides. But that's what actually makes up matter the way it is. And therefore says the Rebbe that if we can compare this to the derivation of the four elements. He said, what the inyan from Choymer, well, that's the inyan like we saw of Olam Habriya, if we take it in Olam Az, but that's a Choymer Poshut Adayin altogether. So he says, if we take that inyan of Choymer, it's completely pashtus and completely mudal from any Gilui Bentayim of the Daled Yeseides. And then we move down into Tzura, we say that is the beginning of revelation. Yeah? But what sort of revelation? Shehu lefi erech hachoimer adayin. It's still got a certain comparison basis, lefi erech, comparison basis, to the inyan of the choimer, which is absolute pshitas. Okemai, bahadalet yeseides, for example, shebechinas achoimer u anoisei es ko adalet sureis. So that inyan from the choimer, the simple, absolute, material state, which is called choimer, that is noisei, is ko adalet sureis, but bechinas pshitas. The atzura, and the coming out into some shape or form, hushin is galu, bechinas dalet sureis. They've now come out into a revelation of 4 sureis, but each one of them is bechinas pshitas adayin, mibchinas hamatzias. It's still too general and mufshat to be called an actual entity of dalet yesod, the way we understand it here lamata. So here we see we've got these 3 levels. So what we're comparing to now, we could say that the madrega of choimer, that is the actual koyach hatzei. That's the koyach which came from the Avish, what he's the iron, and he put it into the Eretz HaGashmi, and we're comparing that to the inyan of choimer. In other words, that's mufshat lagamri mikol tziyur, it's the tachas pshitas, and then comes out of that the inyan of atzura, what that's our, we're talking about the ha'ora klolius, which comes out from the koyach hatzameyach, and then there's going to be a further ha'ora, and that gives rise, or that ha'ora is a direct moker, and it's mislavish in the yesha gashmi, in the inyan from tikkun, which means that between surah and tikkun we have another ha'ora which actually gives rise to the actual matthias or the yesha gashmi, which means that we've really got 3 madregas, but we really have 4. And that's what's called Shtayim Shahein Arba. The Mishnah, the Masechta Shabbos uses that expression. The inyan of Yetzias HaShabbos, Shtayim Shahein Arba. In other words, it's 2, but they're really divided into 2 different movements. The inyan from Haitzah, Yetzia v'Haitzah. I'm sorry, Hachnos v'Haitzah. There's the same thing here, that in a sort of borrowed way, we use the expression that there are only 2, but there's really 4 of them. So that's the inyan of the 2 madregas in the middle, which really split themselves into 2 ha'oras, and then there's the choimer and the eventually yesh hagashmi, which is the tikkun. So says the Rebbe, this choimer, which is our koyach hatzeimeach, well, that's noisei ba'atzmei, well, that carries in itself literally as kol adalet sureis. Now that expression is noisei ba'atzmei, well, that's very important for our purposes, because that helps us to understand the whole concept of this choimer aposher, or the choimer ha'yuli. And we say that there's certain ways that we can relate to in certain inyonim how they are. Hello? I'll have to send you out. I'm sorry, I do not put up with people sleeping in my classes. So put your hand down, hold your head normally, and stay awake. Okay? Otherwise, I'm sorry. Bei mir geht es nicht. In other words, I work hard enough in this place, and I give out my kishis to come down and give these classes, because I'm not going to have you schlafen. The inyan of noisei esko atzuras, well, we need to understand what does that word noisei call it atzuras, because the word noisei means to bear. So in that choimer haposhut, or in the koyach hatzeimeach, which is a inyan poshut b'tachas hapshitas, all the inyanim are there, because like we said, the choimer haposhut is the beginning of bria. It's the beginning of the yesh. It's not the ayin. On the contrary, it's already the beginning of the yesh, which means that, as we pointed out earlier, that's the difference between it and the ayin. It's already got in itself all the things which are eventually going to come out. So why do you say it's a choyma haposhut? If it's got in itself all the things that are going to come out, then it's got them. If it doesn't have them, then it's not anything. So how do you say that it's called a choyma haposhut? And so we answer that by saying that it's noisei. It bears within itself the possibility of giving forth all of those inyonim through different principles, which are either tzimtzumim or other inyonim, which are not really our discussion here at this point. And that is that all the inyonim are there, but they're not there. In other words, it's possible for that to go out of that matter in a form of what you might call ordered ishtalshalas. Mashenkin, in the iron, it's not hard to say that those things are present at all. You can't possibly cholila say that the iron is noisy ba'atzmei es kola hayet, because the iron is completely bavdola legamai. And that's the difference. And Lamaila, in the Olamas, that's the famous biur which occurs in Tzidus Beneged to the difference between the Lifnei Tzimtzum and Ak. What Ak is the first Madrega Liacha Tzimtzum, for example, and everybody says, was it the nafkamina? I mean, we don't say about anything being there in Ak. There's no actual existence of any entity in Ak. But was it the chilik between it and the Lifnei Tzimtzum? That's the difference. We say that Ak is noisei bi'atzmei, it's called Mashiyeh. In other words, it has a potential, not existent possibility in itself, but a potential b'derech hamsoah v'tzimtzum, albeit, to produce those inyonim. Mashenkin, in the ayin, you can't possibly say a thing of that nature. And that's called noisei. It bears, what literally puts up within itself. It sort of bears and is evil, as you might say, puts up within the fact that it has already what's called a possibility, and that's what we call efshodias. And therefore, Bria and Ak and all those different inyonim, and this choyma ha-poshet, which is Olam Bria, or the Gabi, the inyonim sometimes in Nefesh we talk about it, those are all called the inyan of noisei ba'atzmei es inyonim, or efshodias hama, the possibility that Matthias will go out, or not that it actually exists there in any form of his colors. And so that's a very interesting concept, and that's why it's called the choyma ha-kloli, or choyma ha-poshut, and yet nonetheless we say that it's already the beginning of the yesh, because it's possible for that to give rise to the yesh. Shenkin, in the poshut of the ayin, it's not chayt that cloud or cloud. And therefore the Mittler Rebbe, he's got a moshel on that in one of the famous Maimorim. The Mittler Rebbe has a moshel from that, and he says that if you look through, for example, if you're in a house which is made of made of crystal, made out of it uses the word crystal. In other words, absolutely perfect, unbelievably delicate glass. In other words, one of crystal is very, very extremely delicate, and when you look through something, what's the word?
Transparent.
Huh?
Transparent.
I was getting confused with the word opaque, but opaque is the exact opposite. Yeah, transparent. It's transparent in the highest possible form, crystal. So he says, if you're in a house of crystal and you look out into the world, then you're seeing all of the details with the exact, absolute, highest exactitude that could possibly be, because you're looking through crystal. There's nothing in the way. You're seeing all the details. He said, however, you're not seeing anything, because you're looking through, a mechitza. It's just that mechitza has gotten itself a very capable capacity that's able to reveal you through the rays of vision and sun and the chaystat and mitzvot. You can see all the details, but really you're not. You're looking at the crystal. You're not. You're looking at a mechitza. You're not really looking at everything which is out there. You understand? Which means that. What you're really doing is you're seeing all the details, but in a way you're not. You're seeing them, but really you're not seeing them, because you're really only seeing radiations which allow you to see them, because you've got a very powerful mechitza between you and and the inyonim. So that's what he says. That's the whole inyan of the Oyer Shel Lifnei Tzimtzum compared to Ach. The Oyer Shel Lifnei Tzimtzum is absolutely nothing. Yeah, but when you look through a certain mechitza, which is the tzimtzum, then it looks as if there's all sorts of other inyanim on the other side over there, only because of this tremendous mechitza in the middle, what that is the tzimtzum. However, it's very, very how do you call it, a clear thing. The how do you call it, the mechitza is very, very clear, which means that the tzimtzum doesn't really be milim anything. It's only milim legavid the makabel, but not legavid milim himem. Anyway, yes, lahari bezel, but that's one of the inyonim which is brought down in Teves. So therefore he says that the choyma is noisei, it bears within itself, but doesn't really have in itself all of those inyonim, and that's the choyma haposhut. And then the inyan of tzura is how the daled tzuras all go out, the daled how do you call it, shapes of the four elements, or they all go out each in its own way, but they're still kloli and ruchni and mufshat, how they are in Olamai Yetzirah, or in the state of Tzura. And then they go down further, after Avol Kol Echod Hu Pchinas Peshitas Adayin, Mi Pchinas Hama. Yes, they're all still withdrawn from the inyan of being an actual existing definable entity in Olam Ha'asiyah. Whatever the Rebbe talks about it, Barichas, the different levels of the Chayim Tzura V'Tikun. I must cause a b'diva amasko b'kof hei b'kislev hanal de'yesh leimer shezehu inyan or ki'inyan iyu v'gam moyuchad. U'b'sefer shel beinanim perek kof b'kof aleph shezehu p'chinas shechuda iloah u'kamosh kosu b'mokim acher. So we're about to finish this really sweaty little passage here. So now the Rebbe throws in that if you look up in the finality of the beer over there in Reish Samach, in the Chanukah Maim of Kof Eibek Kislev, over there the Rebbe writes over there a further suggestion how we could relate to this whole idea of the Koyach HaTameh or other Giluim of that nature being similar to Oyer, but on the other hand, not really being Oyer, but really being Koyach and not Oyer, or rather being Keli and not Oyer. And he brings down the famous Lashon with the Alter Rebbe brings at the beginning of that famous Igeres in chapter 20. Iyuv Hayeu Chad, Iyuv Gamoi Chad. Well, that's the Lashon of the Tikkun Isaiah. He and his lights literally are one, and he and his bones literally are one. And the bones are referring to the Kelim. Well, that's all Bigarikas, why they call bones. We won't get involved in that. I'll suffice to say that Garmohi refers to the Kelim, meaning that the Eibishter is one with the Oiras. He's Beyichud Aki Nifla with the Oiras, and he's Beyichud Aki Nifla with the Kelim, until we call them Chad. So, fragt the Rebbe over there a simple shaila, why don't you just say, Iyu Chayeu v'gamai Chad? He and his Oiras and his Kelim are all one. Why do you say, Iyu Chayeu Chad, Iyu v'gamai Chad? The answer is the Rebbe over there, that it's two different types of Yehudim with the Atzmas. He said, they're both Yehudim Atzmiyim until we call them Chad. They're like one thing. It's almost impossible to differentiate between them. But he said the way that it's impossible to differentiate between the Oiros and the Atzmas and the Kelim and the Atzmas are two different inyanim, two different forms of Yichud. In other words, that the Oiros are Yichud with the Atzmas in a Oifen, which is Mamish. Like we said, Devekis Oyer Ba'amoyer. There's no inyan of Oyer without Devekis Ba'amoyer. If it's not Dovuk, Kol, Rega V'Rega, Ein Oyer Klalu, Ukla. V'Ila Deinif and the Devekis and the Kelim, or that's like the Devekis of Garmohi, that's like the Kelim, or they're Devekis in Atzmas, atzmus is like a thing that's already gone out from him somewhat, but is nonetheless still betachas a yichud. Well, that's the union of the yichud of the keli with the atzmus, but that's also called chad, just like the others called chad, but it's not the same chad. That's what he writes. So it's not exactly the same sort of chad. Like we brought yesterday, the mashal of the zrika, when you throw into the air. There's Eino Hanami, that koyach is yours, which is carrying the stone, Hepech, it's teva. That's your koyach. And it's betachas hayichud with you, v'haraya, that as soon as it stops being miyuchud with you, in other words, it conks out, then it just, the other stone just falls there. But it's not noticeable anymore. The koyach only to a maven and a mizboinen, where he works out that that's your koyach that's carrying the stone, v'chulu. But it's not begolui and biatzmias in the stone the way he's flying in there, because it's already being, as it were, somewhat nifrat, even though it's still betachas hayichud with you. Mashenken, even for the is not like, if the is not beyichud mamish bepoil, then there's no such union as cloud. What that means that the union of the yichud of the is a much greater and higher yichud. However, since both of them are called iyu hayev chad, then that means that ultimately we can still use a relationship of, like we said before, oyer me'ayin hamoyer. We can still say that there's a certain similarity even in the kli, that you can say he's like oyer me'ayin hamoyer, even though he's not he's really koyach. Yeah, because of this union of iyu gamayir chad, he's also betachas hayichud, even though it's another form of yichud and another type of yichud. In other words, what it comes out is that each of them have got differing aspects to them, but each of them have also got, like all madregas in Kedusha, they've also got inyonim where they partake one from the other's inyonim. And therefore, the actual gilui of the kelim from the atzmus is even from a different type of chad than what the gilui of the atzmus. However, they do have certain inyonim where, since they're both called in the same sentence, chad, they do have certain similarities whereby you can still say that even the gilui of the kelim is in some ways in an even from oyer me'ayin hamoyer l'gabi it. And that's the Gabi our union, that we can say those inyonim which are miskale, but they're keli. Nonetheless, we can still use the concept of me'ayin hamoyer and mamera. We can nonetheless still connect it with the union of gilui yesh mi'ayin alidei choyim utzurava tikkun, which is the keli, the concept of keli, because sof kosof they have a certain relation. And therefore he's mazba there, the Rebbe in that union from Tofrei Sama, in that Maimon from Tofrei Sama, he's mazba there, Barichis, that really the union from Oyer v'Koyach in some ways are like using different Lashonas in order to correct what one doesn't really say about the other. In other words, why do we call koyach koyach? Yeah, because it's not quite like oyer. Or unless we say oyer of a koyach, because sof koyach does have certain yonim which is very similar to oyer, and vice versa. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe uses the expression in Tanya, oyer of a chayis koyach. He uses them all together, because one is, to a certain extent, fills up what you might call the lacking or the chisaron of the other. All right, so therefore he says, uv'sefer shel ba'inan impurus perikof v'kof alav shezeu b'chinas yichud ha'ilua k'mesh kasev makim acher. So anybody who's booking in perikof and kof alav will already have the shiloh that the word yichud ha'ilua doesn't occur in either of those prokim. So, you got a little bit of a shaila. But nonetheless, who's that?
Okay, catch a glimpse.
Unidentified personality?
Unidentified.
Huh?
Unidentified.
I can't hear you.
Unidentified.
Couldn't catch a face.
Was it because you couldn't see him or because we didn't know who it was? Anyway, so the Indian of Yehuda Eloah in these two prokim is that such language doesn't occur in either of those prokim. However, the Alter Rebbe is talking about the fact that even though the Brio actually happened, it didn't really happen. You know the famous Brio over there, that he says that even though the world did actually come out, as far as the Avis is concerned, as far as the Emes is concerned, yeah, Atu Achaloi Nivro Olam Vatu Misha Nivro Ho Olam Mamish Be'isa Ha'oifen. That the Avis is exactly the way it was Koidem Shinivro Olam as the Yisrael Achos Shinivro Olam Uliko Shinoi Klalu Klau. And he said that the Elamus never happened, as it were. Oh, they did. I mean, Cholila say that there's no Elamus. How can you have a cake and eat it too? So, there the Alter Rebbe brings up the concept of the oisias. If you look at the end of Perek Kof and Kof Aleph, he talks about the concept of oisias, letters, that he created the world through oisias. And he says that the difference between our usage of oisias, dibur, speech, and the dibur, bidvar Hashem shomayim nasu, the difference of the Eibishter's dibur and our dibur is that our dibur does actually form oisias inside us, in our mouth, and so it goes out into the air and it becomes like an entity. But the Eibishter's dibur, it never goes out from him, it remains miyuchad with him, just like it was from the very beginning. In other words, that his dibur is miyuchad boy betachas hayichud before there was any dibur. If the dibur is betachas hayichud before there was any dibur, that means nothing ever happened. What do you mean by saying that he has oisias? He doesn't. I mean, they never started. So the answer is that the Eibishter does make oisias, but he makes them betachas hayichud with himself. They're miyuchad with him, betachas hayichud, and they never go out from him. So they're not really a Matthias as far as he's concerned. How does it look as if the word is a Matthias? Because he makes this in called tzimtzum. And like he explains over the tzimtzum is only for you, but not for the tzimtzum only works, it's a one-way deal, the symptom. It's a one-way street. It's only going in the way of the Nivra, but not the Eibishter. And therefore, those Tzimtzumim, they make the Aces look to you as if they're coming for you, as if they've gone out, as it were, from there. Oh, really, they never did. So what happens is that you've got Oisias, which are already the mocker of a creation, but really those Oisias never really depart from their Tachas with the Eibishter, and that's called Yehuda Eloah. In other words, there is an entity, but that entity is really miyuchad with him, but Tachas HaYichud. And that's called Yehuda Eloah. In other words, the musach of Yehuda Eloah is that even the Kelim and the Nevroim never really get created. They never really happen, because they're all B'tachas HaYichud with him. How do they happen? They happen through the union of this symptom, which is ultimately speaking a spiel. The Tzimtzum is a spiel. It never really happened. And that's a famous doctrine of the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe had Mesiras Nefesh for them. Because that's what the big Misnagdim tried to slag against, the whole union of the Alter Rebbe. How can you possibly say that the Tzimtzum was not Kipshutei? If the Tzimtzum is mentioned in the Mukubon, it means that it happened. So the Alter Rebbe said, oh no, it didn't. It happened, but didn't. And that's one of the very famous things that the Misnagdim were Teves neged the Alter Rebbe. That's why he writes very sharp in Shara Yichud V'Emunah at the beginning of Perek Beis, and later on in Igeres HaKodesh much more sharp, and later on in Perek Zion also the Alter Rebbe writes it, and he says that Loich Chachomim Be'eineihem Shetosu Es HaTzimtzum Kipshutei V'chulu, the concept. Arichas that he writes on there. In Perek Beis, the Lashon is somewhat different.
But how can we say that the Eibush didn't change before and after creation if the Eibush's Rotzen was fulfilled? The greatest aspect of the Eibush is his Rotzen. If he fulfilled his Rotzen, he's changed in the greatest way.
His Rotzen is only what he wants. That's what he wants. That's what he wants. He wants that the Elam should look to you as if it's there, but it's not really. That's what he wants.
He's saying the Eibush's Rotzen changed, so it means the Eibush has changed.
I get what I want. The Eibush's Rotzen didn't change. Who said his Rotzen changed? His Rotzen didn't change. That is the Rotzen. So who are Rotzen?
So it was completed, something changed.
Where did it change? What north I
Because you give a child the candy, before the candy, after the candy, the kid's changed. He's got what he's wanted.
That's the way he made it. He made l'chatchila that there was a tzimtzum, but the tzimtzum is not for him, it's only for you. That's the way he made it. That was the rotten. That is the rotten. There's no change in the rotten. Ain't shum shunah.
The rotten was fulfilled because there was a change. Because before he created the world,
that's an undermiser. The rotten was fulfilled. That's another shayla. Was angels they call shaychas to what we're talking about here. That's another stam shayla. How can you say the Eibush has a rotten that's fulfilled? It's not shayla to here. There's answers to that. The famous answer is that the Eibush didn't want either. The whole thing from the rotten is only also that Guga is a rotten. That there should be a thing called rotten, but that he does deliberately also. Not that there is really any rotten. And in Mamela there's no fulfillment of anything really.
What's the point of it?
Yeah, so what's the point of everything? That's, like I said, it's all in a way. The whole thing is a big game. It's a big game. But it's a whacking game. It's a whacking game. In other words, that it's taki a game, but it's a game that the Eibush tied himself up with. Nonetheless, he got himself involved in that game. And so the truth of the matter is, he got himself involved in something which doesn't alter him or mashlim him or anything whatsoever. Absolutely not. Mikol tzadu pina. And yet, nonetheless, you're involved in the whole thing, and you're stuck with it. You just have to get moving and make a deal of a taktanium, and it's a good time. In the far, it says, Avo kol echad u b'chinas pshitas adayin. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Kamosh Kov, say B'Jam Perek Kof, V'Kof Aleph, Shazov b'chinas yichud Eloah, Kamosh Kos u'Mokim Acher. So what is yichud Eloah? That there is some form of an entity, but it's bottled b'tachis ha'bitl. It has no materials. That's called yichud Eloah. So that's what the Rebbe means, that all of these inyonim which appear here like Gabi the Nevroim to be materials, really they're b'tachis ha'yichud with the Eibush, even the inyan of the Oisius or the Kalim, they're also Iyo v'chayev v'gameyev chad. It's only that Legabi in the Nevroim, it's another type of Yichud. Legabi the Mekablim, it's another form of Yichud, and therefore the Oisius over there, or the Sheresh and the Nevroim, are called Yichud Lo. So that's basically the whole picture. Amamele, he said, וכשם שכוח הצומח עצמי מודל בערך מעצמיך הגשמיוס, כמו כן הכוח המשפשט ממנו גם כן מודל בערך מעצמיך. So he said, just like the כוח הצומח. He said, well, that was in our mashal. The choyma haposhut, just like that choyma haposhut is mudal from any tzura whatsoever. In the same way, the oil hameya mimenu, the ha'ora which is meya mimenu, is also mudal from any tzmicha gashmiyas. However, the difference is that it's only a mokya klori that from there they can't come out the Indian of tzura hagashmiyas. And therefore he says that Gamte Muda Berach Me'atzmicha Agashmi Adayin. וכשם שהכוח הצומח עצמי הוא כוח פשוט לגמרי, כמו כן הכוח והעורר המשפשטת ממנו הוא כוח כללי לכל דבר צמח. In other words, not that it gives forth any specific, or it's not even a chayis or a power to grow any particular tzemach, but it's already shaykh that from it there should come the inyan from tzmochim. Masha'in, the koyach hatzomech atzmei is mudu tachas apshitas kol inyan of any shaykhs to any tzmicha. Hainu, klolius ha-koyach lahatzmiach, avoloi koyach proti ha-shayach lechol tzemach befrat ulahatzmiach bepoyach. In other words, it's a koyach kloli, but it's not shaykh to any particular giving forth of any particular tzemach. So to a certain extent, we've more or less gone back to where we were. We had a koyach hatzomech kloli, which is atzmi mamish l'mayla mikol tziyah, and now we say we've been mamshik mimenu ha'ora, and he's just like the original. How do you call it? He's a oil me'ein ha'moer, even though it's kli and not oil, but nonetheless it's oil me'ein ha'moer. And once we got that, then we got a koyach klali, which is also not shaykh any It's also not shaykh l'ani tzemach b'miyuchad. Is Mel Shalom Aleichem, what did you achieve, Damit? You know, you had before, now you got, once again, you can't really grow anything yet. That's what I'd say. You can't have your market garden yet, you still got the koyach HaTzomeach HaKloli, which is, I'm sorry, the koyach HaTzomeach HaAtzmi, which is given you now, HaOra HaKloli. And therefore he says, not shaykh l'kol tzemach b'frat ulaham, I'm sorry, l'kol dva tzemach, hainu, he says, kloliyas akoyach lahatzmiach, it's now the generality of the power to make grow, avoloi koyach proti, of another specific koyach, ashayach kol tzemach b'frat, to any tzemach in detail, ulahatzmiach b'poil, to cause a thing to grow in any way that it'll be a koyach hapoel, that'll be mislabish and machriach any given prat to grow. So it's a kloli, but it's not shaykh to any prat. Now for that it's mashma that this is not, when we use the word kloli, it's not the word klal like we would, it's not the word klal like we might understand it sometimes. And that is that the word klal, we have an expression, ein beklal ela ma sheyesh befrat, v'ein befrat ela ma sheyesh beklal. In other words, that the klal has got a very close relationship to the klal that come out of it. And you could say that klal is only koil in itself a certain, in inverted commas, number of pratim. Once you've been mafarish all the pratim, then to a certain extent the klal doesn't really have any point anymore, because you've got all the details. The whole point of the klal is, if you ever want to talk in a general way which is common to all of them, you can use the klal. And that's a way that we understand klal or prat, and that's the lesson. The Gemara, ein lecha ela ma befrat, I'm sorry, ein lecha beklal ela ma sheyesh befrat, ein lecha befrat ma ela ma sheyesh beklal. And then there's another form of klal, which we call klal, but it's not klal relating to prat in the normal sense, and that's a klal which, even though pratim go out of it, the pratim don't make up the klal. They don't. If you get all the pratim together, you can't deduce the klal from that, because it's too high and too mudal. It's what we call, like, once again, the idea of a hiyuli. It's just that it's closer to the pratim. It's not a hiyuli atzmi, but it's a hiyuli stam. Meaning that all the pratim can go out of it, but it doesn't get tired by the pratim. It doesn't get affected. It can produce a pratim ad ein seif, because it's mudal ba'erech from the details which go out of it, but to a certain extent it's koilel in itself, all of those details. It's not noisei, the details. It's already koilel otam. But it's koilel in such a way that it's still beyond the actual being made up of all those details. And that's, for example, similar to what we saw the other night, the idea of the mind, the koyach ha'maskil. By Adam, that it produces all the detail. That's what actually produces him all of his muskalas, but it's a little bit beyond all the specific muskalas, and it just keeps producing them according to the inyan. And so therefore, says the Rebbe, that's this koyach HaTzomeach HaKloli. So now a little bit later on, we're going to ask the Shaila, why do you need that? Why don't you just say that there's okay, koyach HaTzomeach HaAtzmi, maybe I can be masig. The mochi of that is in the Tetes, the Maimah HaKloli of the Eibishter. But then after that, you've got that already. Somewhere or another, you could draw out of that cloud the pratim. You know, it's higher than the pratim, but maybe we have some koy that we can draw out of that pratim. Just like a mensch, if he really makes a tremendous effort within himself, he can get out of his koy hamaskil. There's something which helps him along. Albeit that's b'chesed Hashem, k'muvur in certain svarim. But why don't we say that in a way with the union of this koy HaTzomeach ha'oreh, which is already kloli, but it's not kloli achmi. It's already kloli. It's not hiyuli. It's achmi. It's only hiyuli. What's the inyam is there? So later on, the Rebbe's gonna deal with that question right near the end of the Maimah, he's going to deal with that question. Why can't we say that we've got some other way to get to that without having another ha'ora in the middle, without having shtayim shein arba? What do we need this other ha'ora in the middle for? Or let's just have the other ha'ora. Why do we need this big klali one in the middle? In other words, why can't we just go somehow to ha'oras? Why do we need two ha'oras? Why can't we deal with one ha'ora in the middle? Why do we have to have these two? What is Q, the whole point of this klali? What's its whole union? And how does it relate to the other ha'ora mimeno? The Rebbe is going to hint at that with one word. It's going to be one word, right near the end of the Maimah, where he throws in how the two relate together and how they pass one into the other. That's going to be another very fascinating shaila, a very fascinating union. However, we see that we're now holding at this moment by the ha'ora kloliyos. And exactly why we need to talk about that, or why we have to have it, or why couldn't we just have one and not two? We'll deal with that a bit later. But once we've got it, so the Rebbe says that ki koyach hatzameach atzmai, he said the etzem koyach hatzameach itself, ari ein lo shayches le'inyan atzmicha klal, ki hu koyach atzmi she'eino bebchinas hamshocha klal, ve'eino shayach lo imalav gam kein shehu koyach kloli al atzmicha, ki im hu koyach atzmi. That the koyach atzmi. Now here's an amazing statement, and it just shows you how really mind-boggling this whole union is. That he says that the koyach hatzmi, he calls it koyach hatzameach, and he says ein lo shayches linyan atzmicha klal. It's called koyach hatzameach. It doesn't really shayches to tzmicha. There it is in the earth, and it's a very tremendously high union with Teves and planted it there, and says, me, I got to do all this tzmicha business. Not me. The koyach hatzameach doesn't really shayches klal to the union atzmicha. So why does Teves have to do that? I mean, let him just make things grow. First he puts in something which is hiuli atzmi. It doesn't really have, but it is. It's called koyach hatzameach. Then he makes a horror from that. Oh, yeah, now we got that horror a bit closer to the game. Oh no, we're not. We have another horror, and then we have. It's very amazing. But nonetheless, what it says is that koyach hatzameach. Come in, guys. That koyach hatzameach haklali. Well, that has absolutely no yachas or shayches, just the way it is, to the union of causing things to grow. And it's not even a klal to some form of prat, even in a higher way, but it is a atzmi. It's an essential thing, all of its own. An essential union all of its own. V'akoyach hamishpashit v'nimtze mimenu ukoyach latzmiach. Aval rak koyach kloli. Well, that's what we're holding right now. We're holding by this koyach kloli, and we're holding by the koyach hatzameach originally, as you might call it, the original, which is a atzmi. Now, Mirz Hashem, in future and developing episodes, we're going to do with this word atzmi. Why do we call it a atzmi? What's it attached? Atzmi, etzim. In other words, just to throw you a little brief to stop you losing your sleep for several days on end, is that Kaviyachol, the Eibishter throws in certain inyanim a little trace of himself, as it were. That is in every inyan, particularly where it's starting a whole new thing, which is leading eventually to Yesh Mi'ayin, then there's a certain trace of him himself.
What does that mean, that it's good?
Huh?
How can it grow?
How can he do it?
How can it grow?
Gerb?
Grow.
How can the apes grow?
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't grow, man. He causes to grow. He causes things to grow. He doesn't grow.
Himself, so what does that mean?
Well, you have to look into the Torah, and it's written Teitze Horetz Desha. Who said that? The Eibster.
That's all happening.
You have to.
Sad shows, man. You have to show often, man.